even Battuta, when he came to India, he was immediately appointed by Delhi Sultan as a Qaji with a stupendous salary of 12,000 silver dinars. Basically, it's a government of the foreigners during the indigenous rule in India prior to coming of the Muslims. Tax was levied at 1/6 of agriculture produce.
Okay.
Agriculture was the main
Main.
source of tax, only 1/6 of the agriculture produce. During Muslim rule, it went as high as 1/3.
So from 15% to 33%.
Our sages wrote Dharma Shastras to explain Dharma because Dharma is a good. They wrote Arth Shastra because worldly pursuit of material power is also a good of life.
Right. And so is Kamsha.
And so is Kama. So Kama is the root of all creation.
This is not a podcast about blaming history, but understanding what went broke. How does a civilization that invented zero forget itself? India did not just lose battles, it lost institutions, memory, and even confidence. To answer these burning questions, we have among us Shashi Ranjan Kumarji, a senior bureaucrat in the government of India, to talk about his book, The Decline of the Hindu Civilization. Welcome to Sangam Talks, Shashiji. These are the questions that have stayed unanswered. We invented zero. We had Sushruta. We had surgery. We had everything that could have made us a great civilization that we had the potential to become. What went wrong? And as I was referencing the book, a very prominent question that came to my mind is, we have been taught that India was slave for 200 years. However, it looks like we were slave for 700 years. We conveniently forget to address the Mughal rule as a slave period. And your book, with facts and figures, makes us understand that we were slaves for 700 years. We'll be enlightened if you can throw some light on this and take this forward.
Good morning and thank you, Vikas. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to have this very important conversation with you in your platform. That's a very important question that you have thrown, and a very interesting one also. Because we have been told, we have been taught that we were virtually under foreign rule so far as British period is concerned, but not before that.
Correct.
So I have read the same books, and this question kept coming in my mind while researching this book. So I will ask you a question. What makes you think that British rule was different from the previous 500s of Sultanate and the Mughal rule?
There was no king to rule in India. Can we say that?
The only argument that is put forward is that British did not stay in India.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
Whereas Delhi Sultans and the Mughal rulers, they made India this home.
Theory.
That's the theory. So let me examine this from different perspectives. And when we explore these from different perspectives, I think we will be able to reach the answers. 200 years of British rule we call foreign, and 500 years of Muslim rule we don't call it foreign. So as soon as somebody asks us this question, was it a foreign rule? We say no, because they stayed here. So sometimes you get the correct answer by flipping the question. So I just want to flip the question.
Okay.
Just flip the question. Was the rule of the Sultanate or the Mughal rule native rule?
No, it was not.
It was not.
It was
So clearly, even by very perfunctory examination, we have able to come to a kind of understanding that it was not native rule, if it was not foreign rule. What it means, therefore, is that foreignness is not something which is discrete concept, either foreign or not foreign. It's a continuum. Foreignness has a degree. There are shades of gray in that between native rule and foreign rule.
okay.
And now I will request you to do some thought experiment.
Sure, that would be nice.
So let us suppose that when British were departing from India in 1947, l- let's say some of them had decided to stay put in India.
The Anglo-Indians, as we call them.
No, the Indians, I mean the British people,
Okay.
those who were ruling us,
Okay,
they were never they were always less than 200,000 in India.
that's correct, sir.
Is it not?
Right, right.
So suppose 100,000 of them or 50,000 of them decided to stay put in India. Would that really change the character of 200 years of British rule from foreign to native?
No, it cannot be.
It cannot.
It cannot be. Natives are natives.
Okay. So my next question, therefore, is that let's say that during British rule, if the British government had made a kind of a rule or a proclamation that the position of viceroy is hereditary, was made hereditary, so that viceroy's sons and their sons
They become
and descendants they become viceroy. All other things remaining the same. And obviously, if the viceroy post itself would become hereditary, then they would stay in India. Their descendants will stay in India.
true that.
Would that make British rule in India not a foreign rule?
No, it won't.
So, now let me give you some statistics. At no point of time during the entire 500 years of Muslim rule, the representation, when I say representation, it means the composition of the nobility. The composition of the nobility, those people who held power
In the courts.
in the court.
Okay.
In the court. At no point of time it went more than 40%.
Okay.
It was always less than 40%. Roughly, you can say 20%, 21% was were Hindus, and another maybe 10, 12%, roughly I'm talking approximately, Indian Muslims. So overwhelming majority, almost to the tune of 70%, was of foreign extraction.
Okay.
Okay.
So the courtiers were all foreigners,
Yeah, mostly.
mostly.
Mostly. I mean, majority of them.
60, 70%.
Yeah. So I will just, when Ibn Battuta came to Delhi in 1334, the city of Delhi gave the impression of being a parasitic capital, where a tiny ruling class, largely of foreign extraction, was living off the labor of an impoverished Hindu peasantry.
Has that not been a character of the Mughal rule all throughout?
Indeed so. So, this I am talking of 1334 when Ibn Battuta comes to Delhi, India. Now, let me fast forward to 17th century. When Berni came, Francois Berni, the French traveler, comes to India, and what does he note? The court is a medley of Uzbeks, Persians, Arabs, and Turks, or descendants from all these people. This is what Berni notes.
Okay.
Known, as I said before, by the general appellation of Mughals. It should be added, however, that children of third and fourth generation who have the brown complexion and the languid manner of this country of their nativity are held in much less respect than newcomers and are seldom invested with official situations.
Oh, that's
So,
a serious concern, sir.
so what it means? What it means that whoever came and actually in the process of in 100 years or 150 years kind of were indigenized, they were assimilated,
Yes.
they were looked down upon.
So they
So,
wanted to keep the tribal and ethnicity of the Middle East intact, and they did not want to assimilate the population who have like merged with the indigenous, still
Exactly,
looked upon or frowned upon.
frowned upon. So, who the positions, the high positions, were given to those people who had just recently come from Iran, from Central Asia, or from anywhere in the Arab world. You know, you will be surprised that even Battuta, when he came to India, he was immediately appointed by Delhi Sultan as a Qaji with a stupendous salary of 12,000 silver dinars
At that
per
point of
annum
time.
at that point of time.
Wow.
And that 12,000 silver dinars was paid as some kind of joining bonus in the very beginning itself. Further, when while his stay in India, during his stay in India, he incurred some 50,000 worth silver dinars of uh, uh, borrowing. No, he borrowed, was not able to pay. He borrowed almost 50,000 silver dinar worth of goods. And this entire 50,000 silver dinars was then provided to him by the court.
Okay.
So, all I'm trying to say is that the substantial majority of people who were involved in decision making were all from foreign countries.
So would it be safe to say that
I will give you one more example,
okay.
and this is during the time of Akbar. Akbar persuaded huge number of Iranian literati to come and settle in India.
Okay.
He established a position in the court of what is called Malikus Shura, poet laureate.
Poet laureates.
Poet laureate.
Okay.
And this was to awarded to a Persian poet only.
So this was a specific kind of a reservation.
Yeah,
You can say that.
You can say that.
Okay. The reserved seat for a Persians in the
Yeah,
courts of it.
yeah.
Okay.
And this position continued until Shah Jahan. The Malikus Shura during this period were Ghazali, Mashhadi, Hussain Sanai, Talib Amuli, Kalim Kasani, Qudsi Mashhadi, all Iranian. Faizi was the sole exception who was of Indian origin.
Okay. So 1 out of say 10
Yeah.
was in Indian.
Further, only 9 out of 59 rated as the best amongst the 1,000 poets of Persian who completed a divan or wrote a masnavi could be identified as non-Iranians.
Oh.
So and what is happening here? You can easily see that basically it's a government of the foreigners, by the foreigners, for the foreigners.
Very true.
If this cannot be categorized as foreign rule, how else we can classify it?
So there was lack of indigenous representation in the courts.
Yeah.
The indigenous were not given enough power and authority. And even if a nominal 30-40% was provided, it was zero or of no significance. The majority decisions lied with the in
See, when I say 30%, please note that this 30% is like those who are people who are holding mansabdars, they were called mansab of certain quantity. The real power actually lay with the provincial governors. Hmm,
okay.
like governor of Kabul or governor of Bengal. Hmm. And there, the Indian representation was minuscule. 80 to 90% of provincial governors were of foreign origin
Across India, wherever.
across India. Across India.
So any administrative decisions lied with the governors, and the governors were basically imported,
Imported.
for lack of a better word.
Yes,
Right?
they were imported.
They were
So it is not that some few thousand people came some 1,000 years back and they came and made this place this home. It's not like situation is not as simple as that. The import of nobility
kept happening.
kept happening during entire 500 years period. Please remember that even during the dying days of Mughal Empire, when the Mughal emperor has to appoint a governor of Awadh, a very important province of India,
Mhm.
whom does he appoint? Sadat Khan, who has come from Iran, Nishapur.
Oh, so this is how.
So it's not that normally in textbook and all we have been told and we have been taught that yeah some people came some few hundred years back and they came and settled here, therefore they became Indian. It's not as simple as that. It's very complicated because people kept coming right until 18th century, and they were, as soon as they came, anybody who was coming from Persia or Central Asia or Arab world was immediately given high position and a very high salary. Even Indian Muslims were not considered worth those positions. I will give you an example. Shah Jahan constructed this grand mosque, Jama Masjid,
Delhi.
Delhi, yeah, Delhi,
Okay.
where we are sitting. I
Right.
mean, a few kilometers from here, in 17th century.
Right.
At that point of time, one can there is an estimate that India's population was around about 15 to 20 crore.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And in Jahangir Nama, Jahangir himself says that 1 out of 6, only Muslims were only out 1 out of 6 in the population. And a very anecdotal kind of evidence, but yeah, I mean, and which is quite accurate actually. So you assume 15-16%. So clearly,
Uh,
2 to 3 crore
3 crore
people,
were Muslims in India.
Muslims were in India.
Right.
Not one Indian Muslim was thought fit to be appointed as the Imam of Jama Masjid. And Shah Jahan therefore brought a person from Bukhara
Okay.
in
So
Uzbekistan.
a person from Bukhara was deemed qualified enough
Yeah,
to become the Shahi Imam of Jama Masjid.
yeah.
However, they could not find a qualified person or learned enough.
By that time, please note, by the time of Shah Jahan, Islam in India is 900 years old.
We already have a good enough following.
900 years old, and there is a good population of Muslim, but they are not fit enough to be appointed as the Imam of Jama Masjid.
So it's a genetic dislike for indigenous people, is what we can term it.
Just compare like British.
Right.
Whatever Indian component was there, that was at the lower rank. At the higher rank, it was basically the British who were ruling the roost. So it was almost same. Situation was similar, if not the same, during these 500 years of Muslim rule in India.
Very true. So they kept importing the viceroys, they kept importing the imams, the courtiers, counselors, and even the governors.
Yeah.
So all the administrative roles or the religious, spiritual roles were from people who were basically brought down from Central Asia.
In those 500 years and later 200 years of British rule, native had very little say in decision making. I will theorize now that how do we decide that whether a rule is foreign rule or not? The one first question is that who holds the power,
The seat of power.
the seat of power? Who holds the power? And if the power is held by largely foreign people of foreign origin, then
It's a foreign rule.
it's foreign rule. This is a secondary question, but important question, that for whose benefit that power is exercised. Component, I mean, even if the rulers are foreigner, largely, but they take decisions only for the betterment of the people, then to some extent, that deficiency is kind of made up.
So if they work for the society, you can say,
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. What do you call, there is some redeeming feature in that.
oh yeah,
There is some redeeming feature in that rule.
correct.
But if the powers are held by foreigners, and it is also power is also exercised for the benefit of the foreigners. See, please understand that during the indigenous rule in India, prior to coming of the Muslims, tax was levied at 1/6 of agriculture produce.
Okay,
Agriculture was the main
main
source of tax.
correct.
Only one-sixth of the agriculture produce.
Lagan.
Lagan. During Muslim rule, it went as high as one third.
So from 15% to 33%.
33%. And sometimes, particularly during the time of Alauddin Khalji, the method of calculation was such that it was calculated on the basis of a predetermined yield from per se per hectare of land or per acre of land. That this much acre, 1 acre of land will provide this much produce, and 33% I will take. So when the crops were not as good, the farmers had to part almost as high as half of the produce.
So a drought or maybe a less rainfall can
Less
lead
rainfall.
to you giving a minimum guarantee of sorts.
Yeah,
Right? This
yeah,
is how it will be done because it was calculated on a
yeah,
base estimates.
yes. And this is very also something that is very interesting. So, how does Kautilya define foreign rule? That is very interesting.
Okay.
He says foreign rule is the worst form of exploitation where the conqueror who subdues a country by violence,
Okay.
okay, never counts it as his own dear country,
True.
oppresses it by over taxation and exactions,
Three. Nice.
and drains it of its wealth.
So all four characteristics have been met by the Mughal rule as well.
Yes.
That's true. And this was Kautilya.
This is Kautilya saying, defining what foreign rule is.
Nice. So we have been like the definition of foreign rule has been very skewed till now.
Yeah, I will. What I will say is that we have not sufficiently explored this question. We have not gone delved deep into it. That what defines foreign rule and what is foreign rule, and particularly we are shy of talking about this in respect of the 500 years of Muslim
So
rule.
basically, since the skin tones were the same, we called them okay. This was an Asian rule. We do not consider it as a foreign rule.
Right. Now see, Tabaqat Nasiri is a work written by Minhaj Siraj in 13th century. And Minhaj was obviously living in India. His sister was still living in Khorasan, in Persia. So she wrote a letter because she was undergoing some financial trouble. So she wrote a letter to her brother seeking some help. And the Minhaj Siraj approached the Sultan. And Sultan said, no problem at all. Please send, I will send some help to your sister in Khorasan. Who granted him 40 slaves and 100 donkey load of gifts, which were sent to Khorasan from Multan.
Wow. This is like a huge
So what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, in case
annual
of
budget of a country, you can
yeah,
say.
so now can what in case of British, of course, it is very pronounced. But by the time Industrial Revolution started, and you could transfer huge amount of wealth uh, from their colony from the colonies, but they also transferred wealth as far as practicable at that point of time.
Whatever was feasible and practical.
Exactly, and
I mean, the modes of travel were very
yeah,
slow.
yeah,
That logistics were not that up to the mark. But whatever they could, they did,
yeah, they did,
and they kept coming.
and they kept
We
coming.
have 1,000 years of Somnath
Yeah,
to as a history and testament to it,
yeah.
right?
So that's why I have in my book I have made this argument that India lost its political sovereignty in 1206 when settler was established, and since then the native people ceased to matter. Were not able to take decisions on their own behalf.
Right. So there's a mention of two universities, Nalanda and Alexandria, in your book. Uh, how do you see a similarity in between these two? Like Nalanda at that point of time, Alexandria was considered as a pinnacle of scientific and economic research at that point of time.
In Greco-Roman world, I think there were two great centers of learning, higher learning. One was Alexandria,
Mhm.
the other was Athens. In India, of course, there were many. Nalanda, Bikramshila, Sompura, Udantapuri, Balavi in the west. And even earlier than that, there was a great university in Takshila.
Takshila.
Takshila. Now, in case of Alexandria, Alexandria was basically established by Ptolemaic king, Ptolemy I, who was one of the Alexandrian general who established in 3rd century BCE. And it was a great library. There was a great library there. But what happened was, and this was particularly a very famous center for science. You name a person of antiquity, Eratosthenes, who first measured the circumference of the earth, Aristarchus of Samos, Hipparchus, Galen, Archimedes, all belong to Alexandria. And then what happened was that when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, then the emperor uh, ordered this great library to be destroyed,
Knowledge centers.
knowledge center to be destroyed, because for them they took great pride in burning books and destroying library, because they were considered to be the repositories of false knowledge. The
They were considered to be repositories of false knowledge.
false knowledge. The only true knowledge was Bible and nothing else,
So, like we had for Nalanda.
like we have for Nalanda.
So, the only true knowledge
Yeah.
was in their Holy Quran,
Yeah.
and you have to burn down the entire university that kept burning
Yes.
for days and months.
So Nalanda was destroyed by, and not only Nalanda, nearby two universities, both Bikramshila, Udantapuri, some of the education centers, and apart from universities, which were viharas, which were great center of learning, there were temples which took part in educational activities. There were mutts which supported education and intellectual pursuit. All these were either they were destroyed or they declined for the want of patronage.
So, not just the university, the entire ecosystem was destroyed.
The entire ecosystem was
So, we had free education, we had institutional learning, and then we also had a debating culture. The
Yes.
Shastrarth, as we called them.
Yes. Shastras was a great thing in. So, in fact, I am very fond of saying that if the essence of our civilization can be asked to be written in only two sentences, what those sentences will be. And I always say that the first sentence will be that ekam sat viprabodha vadanti. The truth is one, but different people see it differently. There are different perspectives that people see. And the second is that vade vade jayate tatvodha. How do we get to truth? We get to truth by argument and counter argument, not through force or violence. So, these two are so because we had a great debating culture, there were very great Vada tradition, and the Vada tradition was specifically for the purpose of reaching the truth. Vada is not wrangling. Wrangling is another kind of that's called jalp or vitand. But Vada proper, Vada is basically to reach the truth. And because we had this Vada culture, therefore, we all were always interested in knowing the truth through rational scientific inquiry,
Reasoning.
reasoning, through reasoning.
And what we had was faith overpowering reasoning.
Yes.
Wow. That's very sorry to hear. Like we talk more about debates and reasoning and logic analysis, everything, just because they burned the whole university, the whole knowledge centers, because they wanted the faith to prevail, not the reasoning.
So this, I have written this in my book that this dichotomy between faith and reason, or this enmity between faith and reason, is a not a characteristic of polytheistic faith anywhere in the world. Not only in India, anywhere in the world. there is no confrontation between faith and reason. Faith and reason both coexist together.
True.
They are both they coexist together. They are not antagonistic to each other.
And that's what we
But
encourage.
in monotheistic faith, faith and reason are antagonistic to each other,
Faith
and
reason.
reason are antagonistic to each other.
That's what is we see right now.
Yeah.
You cannot reason.
Yeah.
There is no scope for reasoning.
We have always have this tradition of reasoning,
Right.
and in the very introduction of my book, I have quoted a great 9th century text, Agam Adambar, written by Jayant Bhatt in Kashmir. And this is a very different kind. It's a play, but it's a very different kind of play. It's a play whose central theme is philosophy. You know?
Okay.
Yeah. And in the city of Srinagar, there is this guy called Shankarshan who has recently mm, become a graduate, and he is a follower of Mimamsa school of Darshan, and he wants to defeat all other school of Darshan through reason, no, in debate. So he has his first debate with a Buddhist Dharmottara, and he systematically destroys his idea of Chanbhangavad. It's called
Okay.
momentariness, Chanbhangavad. Then he has a debate with a Jaina scholar. Then he debates with a Charvaka scholar, and then he kind of in that assembly. What is noteworthy in that discussion is that everybody is debating that according to the s- set rules of Shastrarth. And in Shastrarth, there is a particular way of
Debate.
debate in the sense that you first state the position of your opponent. That this is how I understand your position. This is your position. And then the person concurs, yeah, this is my position. And then he systematically refutes his position one by one. That's a specific way of doing Shastra.
You listen to the person.
Yeah.
You understand his standing.
Yeah.
You confirm his standing, and
Yes.
then you provide your rebuttal.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the specific way of doing. And
That's
it is done. And the umpire is a person called Dhairya Rashi. He is an umpire who has to take a call. And in the end, Dhair Rashi concludes with something very interesting. He says that they whatever charges that you are bringing against other darshans, other followers of other darshan can bring the same charge against you. So how can we decide which one is better? Therefore, it is best to accept the proposition that your path is as good as mine, and the debate ends there.
mutual agreement.
Mutual agreement that, yeah, maybe truth is so complex that one person cannot see it completely, and you can only see different perspectives of perspectives of the same truth, and therefore all perspectives are as valid, and the debate ends.
Uh, there's a mention of astronomy in your book, which I also heard in your one of your lectures, and very beautifully you talked about Aryabhata. Would like you to throw some light on that. Aryabhata versus Greek astronomy, as we said.
As I Hindu astronomy and Greek astronomy, I have touched
Okay.
this topic in, and kind of they had a slightly fundamentally they had slightly different approach
In understanding.
in astronomy. So one thing you must first understand is that in ancient Greece, geometry was the science, the subject. Anybody who had even the pretension of being an intellectual
Okay.
must have studied geometry. is a foundational science. In India, the same was true of grammar.
Okay, so if you are an intellectual in Greece, you need to have the basic understanding of geometry
Yeah.
to start with.
Yeah.
And in India,
Yeah.
or Bharat as we call it,
Yeah.
grammar founds the foundation of
These
everything.
two gentlemen, Panini in case of India, who wrote Ashtadhyayi, and Euclid in case of Greece, these two are formidable intellectual figures. And their way of method of their method, in case of Panini, his grammatical method, and in case of Euclid, his axiomatic method, permeates all disciplines. So Greeks were very passionate about establishing universal truths and axiomatic deductive science.
Axiomatic detective
De-
science.
deductive,
Deductive.
deductive,
Okay.
deductive science. Why I
So
say
deductions from the axiomatic.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
So what you have is basically that you start with a very few self-evident axioms, है ना? Like that. Only one line can be drawn from 2 points. Okay, you start with some very basic self-evident assumptions, and then logically, step by step, you establish truth. And they are universal truth. For example, when you must have studied mathematics in your early student life, once you prove that three angles of a triangle add up to 180 degree,
180 degrees.
180 degree, you need not then measure the three angles. There is
Yes.
no need for any empirical validation
Right.
of that theorem.
Because it had already been proved.
That is been proved.
Yes.
It has been deductively, axiomatically proved.
So some of the angles of a triangle sum up to 180 degrees.
It will.
It's still there.
Yeah, it's still there. There is no need to do any experiment on that, or no need to collect any data. There is no empiricism involved in that.
Correct.
In India, Panini actually followed grammatical method, which is algorithmic in nature. And here, our sciences relied more on empirical approach rather than deductive approach.
Okay.
Okay. So you have this, you write algorithm, and through the algorithm, in fact, if you read the Aryabhati of Aryabhat, that astronomical text, very important astronomical text of Hindu astronomy, you can say that it's basically a collection of more than 50 algorithms. Algorithms to calculate the positions of planets.
Okay.
Ultimately, the whole point of astronomy was
So calculate the positions.
yeah,
And
are you able to predict
the next position of
next position of the planet?
right.
So they are following this algorithmic method, and then they are kind of collecting empirical data through naked observation and comparing these two, what the algorithm provides and what are the actual observations. And by comparing the two, they are always trying to refine their algorithm so that it can provide better and more accurate predictions. So that was the approach of
So 50 algorithms basically were used to create that astronomical predictions
yes,
in ancient India.
yeah. Please,
So all the eclipses,
yeah,
जितने हम ग्रहण कहते हैं,
yes,
right? Everything was summarized.
everything. They also predicted, but in their case, they started again with, just like in geometry, even in astronomy, they started with model. So they have a model that the Earth is at the center, and there are planets which are rotating around, and they are revolving in circles, and it is from these models that they deduce the planetary motions. Please understand that we should not make this mistake of thinking that Greeks did not know empiricism and Indians did not know deductivism. No, that's not true. What I'm saying is relative emphasis. They gave much more emphasis on deductive logic, and we gave much more
Empirical
emphasis on empirical
logic.
logic.
Right, sir. So, uh, coming back to the book, the topic of zero is very interestingly mentioned here. And well, some of it was very clear, but to an audience, I would like, if you like to summarize that, the importance of zero and how we used it.
Yeah. So, like uh, zero is a very fundamental entity.
So, I'll just
Yeah.
interject in between. The Greeks, before the advent of zero, where the Greco-Roman, the calendar, the way we calculate Roman numerals, as we mentioned, has no mention of zero, right? Where in India we started using zero. So, what impact zero had in the mathematical calculations and also the way humans think?
See, you have to distinguish between positional number system and non-positional number system. We The decimal system is a positional number system. है ना? The Roman the way of writing numerals is not a positional number system.
Correct. It is XVI.
Yeah. Okay. Zero was also known to other civilizations. The- for example, Babylonian, Egyptians, Mayans, Chinese. But the distinction that we have to make is that prior to, I mean, except in India, in all other places, this zero was used in a different roles, but it was never a number in its own right.
Okay.
Number in itself.
So it was understood, but it did not have an identity of a number.
It did not have an identity on its own. Plus, it was somewhere it was being used as merely a separator. For example, in Egypt, they called zero nafr, and nafr were basically a separator to separate up from down.
Okay, so the time, the space, or you can say the demarcation.
Yeah, demarcation. Then in Chinese, they had the same conception of decimal system, but they were not representing zero with any symbol. Okay, and zero was also not a number in Chinese system, and they represented zero with a blank, but it was a placeholder in China.
Concept of a base was there.
Yeah,
Baseline.
base was there. Placeholder. It was acting as a placeholder. Okay. So suppose you write 305. So when you indicate zero in the middle, you what do you denote? You denote that the tens are missing.
Right.
Tens are missing. Okay.
Right.
So it's just merely a placeholder.
It's a placeholder.
Or 4059. So the 100th place is missing. That is the significance of zero in this case. So it was a placeholder in Chinese mathematics. Similarly, it was also a placeholder in Babylonian mathematics, Mayan mathematics. But zero was not a number. Zero was not a number in itself. So first time we really don't know when zero was exactly invented or who invented zero in this sense I'm talking now. A multi-dimensional object which is both a separator, a placeholder, and a number in its own right. This was invented in India, but exactly when we don't know, exactly by whom we don't know. First time it finds mention in Sput Siddhanta Brahmagupta.
Okay.
In 628 CE. He first time says that zero is a number in its own right and you can perform calculation on zero. You can add zero to a number, you can subtract zero from a number, you can subtract number from a zero, you can add number to a zero, you can divide by zero, like that. So Brahmagupta, Brahmagupta Siddhanta, and Brahmagupta is basically called a systematizer of arithmetic. It's not that that knowledge was not there earlier. It must have been about the, but he systematized that knowledge and brought into some kind of framework. And he first provides that yes, zero is a number in itself, and we can perform
numerical calculation.
yes with it. And of course, no calculation was possible without zero. No large calculation was possible. Everything
True.
thereafter.
True.
So it's a great ingenuity of human being.
So coming from zero and moving on to trigonometry, the understanding is very different.
Yeah.
And then there is a mention of the Kerala school in your book.
Yeah.
So please enlighten us.
So in different branches of mathematics, uh, we made contribution. Arithmetic, algebra, trigonometry, and you can say very early calculus.
Calculus, yes.
And the calculus is particularly the gift of the Kerala School of Astronomy and Mathematics. And in one department of mathematics where we are not as advanced, like the Greeks, is basically geometry. In geometry, the Greek showed far more ingenuity.
Yeah, and they utilized it very well in their architecture as well.
Yeah. So geometry we were not as good, but in all other branches of mathematics,
We were like quite advanced, not as we were told, like the Pythagoras theorem, the misconception that it was invented by Pythagoras, but earlier it was c square is equal to a square plus b square, not the way we understand the c is equal to under root of a square and b square. Moving on from mathematics to medicine and surgery, there's been a great mention about it in your book. Please enlighten us.
In fact, I have compared three systems of medicine: the Chinese system, the Indian system, and the Greco-Roman system.
Okay.
I have touched a bit upon both, and little bit more description about the Ayurveda and the two foundational texts of Charak Samhita and Sushruta Samhita. Of course, Charak was basically a man of medicine, whereas Sushruta was more surgery. So I would just like to quote Sushruta himself.
Okay.
And you will see his vision in his. Before commencing actual practice, the intending physician has to obtain a proper license or permission from the royal court. For this, he has to demonstrate beyond all doubt that he has thoroughly mastered the theoretical and practical knowledge imparted to him, has really understood and assimilated his learning, and has been properly trained in making independent observations and practical application. Such attainments are only the minimum requirement equipment of a physician.
So basically, even after learning, you have to get yourself certified.
Yeah. So just see the
detailing,
the detailing, and it's basically
precise.
Even now,
right.
A doctor has to take a license. He has to go undergo training. The same
We are
thing.
following the same thing.
Same thing, and even the ethics of it. Though
right.
I'm now talking of ethics, and I quote again him: "A physician's duty is to treat all deserving persons to the best of his ability. When a physician takes up a case, he should wholeheartedly apply all his skill, faculties, and knowledge to his work. He should remember that patients trust their physicians implicitly to the extent of placing their lives unhesitatingly under his care.
So the trust.
Hence, a physician should take as much care of each and every patient as he would of his own son."
So you cannot treat a person differently.
Yeah. So
it's just a patient.
This is the ethics of medicine.
Ethics of.
No, we normally here take nowadays the Hippocratic oath.
Yes.
Okay, but
it's already there.
It's already there.
And this was part of the curriculum, as you can mention, that this is the procedure.
This is part of Sushruta Samhita. I'm quoting from Sushruta Samhita.
Wow. And so conveniently being ignored.
Yeah.
We talk about Hippocratic oath, we do not talk about Sushruta Samhita.
Yeah.
The ethics of medicine.
Yeah, the ethics of medicine.
Very good. Very true.
And then you will find that in Sushruta Samhita, there is a mention of 121 type of surgical instruments. So the drawings of drawings of some of them I have put in my book as an exhibit. You must have seen that. So, of course, I would accept the fact that in the second half of first millennium common era, we did not progress as much in medicine as we were progressing in other department of science, for example, mathematics or astronomy. So somehow we see a kind of stagnation setting in the field of medicine. If you come to 12th century, you will find that Bhaskaracharya is writing his Siddhant Shiromani, which is absolutely outstanding work, one of the finest work of astronomy and mathematics written in ancient medieval India. Same kind of new thinking we are not able to see in, at least in case of medicine. That's my conclusion from reading the text.
I see. Uh, Moving on from science, medicine, and mathematics to art and culture. Kama Sutra has been described as a knowledge uh, and not as indulgence.
Correct. Because there is no forbidden fruit here. Please,
There is no forbidden fruit.
there is no forbidden fruit.
Was even there a forbidden fruit? That's a story.
Yeah. So, and out of 9 ras that we have in our literature, Navras,
Navaras.
which ras is called the Adi ras? Shringar is called the Adi ras.
Shringaras.
Yeah. So, Shringar ras is actually Adi ras. It is also called Ras Raj or the king of ras. In our culture, Kama is root of all creation.
Okay.
Without Kama, there is no creation. So it was something not to be denied, or to be ashamed of,
Or despise of.
or talk in the sense that you have to talk it disparagingly or something like that. It was really of the three Purusharths. Kam is one. Dharma, Arth, and Kam. These are the three Purusharths. These are the three goals of human life. So, only thing is that the, that Kama has to be enjoyed in coordination with, in harmony with two other goals of life, that is Dharma and Arth. And you cannot indulge in excess of it. But within the parameter set, Kama is a legitimate goal of human life. So, our sages wrote Dharma Shastras to explain Dharma, because Dharma is a goal. They wrote Arth Shastra because worldly pursuit of material power is also a goal of life.
Right. And so is
And
Kamsha.
so is Kama. So, Kama is the root of all creation.
Right, sir. So, how would you compare Kautilya to Aristotle and Shang?
So, these three gentlemen are near contemporaries.
Okay.
Yeah. And all of them have written text on statecraft. The Lord Shangyang book is called the Book of Lord Shang, and Aristotle, of course, wrote Politics. The, I have highlighted some of the positive things from all these three texts. Very early on, the Greeks are very concerned about balance of power in their statecraft.
Okay.
That is a concern that has been existent in their system for a long, long time. Check and balance.
Check and balance.
Check and balance. And politics, therefore, talks of 6 types of constitutions: monarchy, aristocracy, polity, and it is a very interesting classification in the sense that first he says, who wields the power? If the power is wielded by one person, it's called monarchy.
Right.
If power is wielded by a number of people, it is called aristocracy.
Aristocracy. Right.
And when power is distributed to a large number of people, it is called polity. So these 3 types of constitution, he calls it ideal constitutions. An ideal constitution means that whether whoever holds the power, either a king or aristocrats or whether it is a polity, that power is exercised for the benefit of other people. But if a monarch starts employing the power only for his own benefit, then it is not no longer a monarchy. It becomes what he calls a deviant system called tyranny.
Okay, so we have been understanding monarchy in a very different way.
Yeah,
Monarchy ideally should be a centralized power for the benefit of the people.
yeah. That is how Aristotle in
And
Politics
Christian.
write it. Yeah,
Okay.
and ideally he says that ideal system is monarchy. That is what he says.
Right.
But he says that, however, monarchy can never be ideal because one person will misuse his power,
Yeah, I mean, like when you have power, you tend to.
to misuse it.
Right.
And then he says that democracy is the deviant version of polity. Hmm.
That's
So he says that, yeah, it is a deviant version, but that is the most pragmatic form of governance because you
again.
distribute power to a large number of people.
Right.
And therefore, from very early on, Greeks have this conception of democracy. Hmm.
The Greek
and,
parliament.
and the Greek and Aristotle has written that his work Politics after analyzing more than 100 existing city states of that era in Greece.
So he analyzed more than 100 city states and then came to this conclusion.
Yeah, and then he wrote this work called the Politics. In case of Arthashastra and Book of Lord Atsang, there is only one form of government, and that basically king.
King, right?
Basically king.
Monarchy.
Yeah, but then Lord Shangyang emphasis is on something else. He emphasizes on equality of law
Okay.
in his book. The law should be equal for all. That is his core theme.
So non-discriminatory.
Not non-discriminatory. Should be equal to all. Law should be equal to all. Very important point of the book of Lord Shangyang. And it is said that once the prince committed some mistake, so obviously it was impossible to punish the prince. So he got the nose of tutor of the prince cut off to punish him.
Okay. Because he taught him wrong.
Yeah,
right?
because he taught him wrong.
Then is-
Yeah. Arthashastra has very different emphasis. In fact, out of all three works, you will find that Arthashastra talks nitty-gritties of administration. It mentions department heads. You know, these are called superintendents of departments,
yeah,
and there is
departmental heads.
departmental heads, and there is superintendent of gambling.
Okay.
There is a superintendent of prostitution mentioned in Arthashastra. So all these are regulated. State is regulating all these activities, and therefore there are different adhyakshas of different departments. So you in other two works you will not find the nitty gritty of administration, but in Arthashastra it provides much more detail about the administration. It also lays down the civil and the criminal laws. So it's a much more voluminous work compared to the
So
rest two.
India had beautifully detailed out and it understood power very well.
Yeah.
Why didn't it use it to the maximum potential? It could have been a world power, like going around the world, creating the power structures.
Yeah, I mean, I think even Kautilya's Chakravarti king,
Yeah.
this conception of Chakravarti king and Vijayagishu, that Chakravarti king only extended up to the border of Bharat, from Himalaya to the seas. Maybe the reason I can only speculate, and one can only speculate that perhaps it was a kind of a self-sufficient geography where there was bountiful rain, the land was fertile, everything that could be obtained at that point of time.
So you had the boundaries, deserts in one side, mountain on the other, and you had the
Seas
seas
on-
on the other side.
Very secure geography, and a self-sufficient kind of geography where you need not go out to get anything, and all the riches which you needed to have comfortable life perhaps was there.
So how many prevailed?
Yeah, So, kind of harmony, not in that sense. What I'm saying is that you did not feel the need to explore the outside world. And that is the best explanation that I can provide.
It did not.
On the other
It was
hand,
you were self-sufficient. You
yeah,
had everything you need.
on the other hand, those who were living in harsh climate in Central Asia, I mean, you must see that in the Middle Ages, the Central Asian tribes are going everywhere. They are attacking everyone, right
The
from
nomadic nature,
nomadic nature. Yeah, the
they kept
difficulty of
life in the deserts.
life in desert. So that gave them incentive to come and attack us, but perhaps not us, because there was nothing to be obtained from those land. Why would you go actually to Central Asia? To why will you gain victory over them? What will you get from there at that point of time?
That's true. So, did India prioritize harmony and forgot its survival instincts?
This can be answered slightly differently, in the sense that when you did not face the brunt of those invasions, till, or even if you face the brunt of invasions, but the invaders came assimilated within the society, till that point perhaps you did not feel the need for it. But at some point of time, there should have been a realization that without hard power, soft power cannot survive. That thinking perhaps could not develop, that you need to build hard power in order to protect your soft power.
Okay. So, India basically started the spread, right, from the desert to the seas. Coming about talking about the kings that spread the Indian culture and philosophy across Central and Southeast Asia. We had temples where philosophy going around the world, and you have mentioned that very beautifully in your book. So, could you please elaborate that?
There's a very well known story that Buddhism actually went from India through the Silk Route to China and then to Japan and Korea. And it also went right from the time of Ashoka towards this Sri Lanka, Myanmar, etc. And Hinduism also in Cambodia, Indonesia, what is now known in Malaysia, in these places. But these were all, my central argument in this book is that these were not the consequences of any kind of invasion.
Yes, this was soft power.
They were soft power. So soft power traveled on its own strength,
Right.
without needing any
Single soldier.
yeah, without a single soldier. That's a beautiful quote by a the Chinese statesman Hu Shi, who says that India dominated China for close to 20 centuries without having to send a single soldier. And that is why I have named that chapter, titled that chapter, Without a Single Soldier. So it was like power of the ideas rather than ideas of powerful.
But would it not be not wrong to say soft power works until someone shows up at your doorstep with a sword?
That's the hard lesson that you have to learn from your experience. That it, of course, it worked.
Right. It works,
It works, but only to an extent.
but you need to be prepared for it.
Yes.
With this, we have reached a milestone, which is understanding how rich our civilization was, the hidden past, and what we should take pride in. This is the end of part one, and we will discuss more about the civilization and how the decline happened in the part two. Keep synced.